June 12th, 2026. Gran Paradiso, Italy. 3 experienced climbers had just set out before dawn. By nightfall, every single one of them was dead, and 6 more would follow before the weekend ended. This is the summer climbing season in the Western Alps, not the Himalayas, not some frontier range barely anyone has heard of, the Alps. The most visited mountain range on Earth, with centuries of documented routes, staffed mountain refuges, and rescue teams that are among the best equipped anywhere in the world. The summer of 2026 looked, on paper, like a strong one. A long-awaited weather window had finally opened across France and Italy. Clear skies, warm temperatures, every condition that pulls climbers onto the 4000ers they have been planning all winter. But those perfect skies were hiding something that no forecast could show. The part I find most extraordinary about this story is that not one of these 9 climbers died in a storm. Not one was caught by an avalanche. The mountain did not look dangerous. That is the most important detail. This is the story of the deadliest mid-June weekend the Western Alps have seen in years. Welcome to Tourist Tragedies. To understand what happened this weekend, you need to understand what the Alps are becoming. Every year, tens of thousands of people attempt serious alpine routes across France and Italy. The peaks involved in this weekend are not obscure. The Matterhorn's Italian route sees thousands of climbers every summer. Gran Paradiso, the highest peak located entirely within Italian territory at 4,061 meters, is considered one of the most approachable 4,000ers in the range. A reasonable first step into high-altitude mountaineering, a peak that experienced climbers describe as serious but known. But here is the piece that makes this weekend more than a collection of individual tragedies. The Alps have been warming at roughly double the global average rate over the past several decades. What that means in practice, on the face of these mountains in June 2026, is something that rescue workers appear to understand far better than most climbers do. Terrain that was firm and reliable in mid-June a decade ago is now showing conditions more typical of late July. The mountains had not changed, the surface underfoot had, and that difference, it turns out, was everything. So, who was actually on these mountains that weekend? Think about what it takes to attempt a serious alpine route. You do not wake up one morning and decide to climb the north face of Gran Paradiso or the Kuffner ridge on Mont Maudit. These are not hiking paths. These are technical mixed routes requiring crampons, ice axes, ropes, and the kind of judgment that only comes from years of progressive experience in the mountains. You earn the right to be on terrain like that. Sergio Martinelli was 29 years old, an economist and data analyst from Trento. Maycole Zenati was 39, an IT professional from Trentino. Antonio Sardano was 49, a veteran emergency medical worker with Trentino Emergenza. Close friends who had climbed together before, described by family members as thoroughly prepared and deeply familiar with the route. The siblings on Mont Maudit were 24 and 26 years old, from Savoie, France. They had chosen the Kuffner Ridge, a classic but demanding mixed route on the Mont Maudit side of the Mont Blanc Massif. Sharp, exposed terrain, knife-edge sections, the kind of line you only attempt when your experience and judgment are genuinely matched to it. The skier on the Brenva Spur was 44 years old, from Haute-Savoie. The climber on the Italian normal route of the Matterhorn was experienced enough to be on one of the most trafficked high-altitude ridges in the Alps. These were not people who had underestimated the mountains. These were people who had spent years earning the right to be where they were. And by Saturday evening, 6 of the 7 who would die in the first 24 hours were already gone. The PGHM rescue unit in Chamonix had responded to 11 separate incidents in a single day. Something had changed on those mountains, and nobody had told them. The winter of 2025 to 2026 had delivered below-average snowfall across most of the Western Alps. That sounds like a weather statistic. On a mountain face in June, it is not a statistic. It is a fundamental change in what the terrain looks and feels like under your feet. Alpine climbers depend on what is called névé, which is consolidated snow that has partially melted and refrozen through the winter months. It has grip. It has give. A crampon front point bites into it predictably. And critically, if you slip on neve, the ice axe you carry can stop the fall. You drive the pick in, throw your weight onto it, and the mountain catches you. Every serious alpine climber trains that motion until it is instinct. It is the single most fundamental survival skill in the sport. When the snowpack melts out early, what is left is bare glacier ice, hard, polished, compacted. A crampon that rolls even slightly on 50-degree glacier ice does not give you a fraction of a second to respond. The fall begins before your nervous system has registered that anything has happened. The axe in your hand becomes irrelevant. By June of 2026, rescue officials in both the Aosta Valley and Chamonix were already noting that routes across major 4000ers were showing bare ice conditions weeks ahead of the normal calendar. A solo climber who ascended the Gran Paradiso, north face on the morning of June 13th, the morning after the 3 deaths, posted an account describing the snow as present for only around 50 meters, with the rest of the face described as frozen, porous, and unstable. Conditions that would have been unthinkable on that face in mid-June a generation ago. And there was something else happening beneath the visible surface. Permafrost is the layer of frozen water locked inside the rock and soil of the high alpine bands. It acts as a binding agent, holding loose rock in place. As temperatures rise, that permafrost thaws. Sections of a mountain face that have held reliably for decades begin to loosen. Guides in the Aosta Valley had described previously reliable terrain as completely unpredictable in recent seasons. The mountain looks identical to every photograph ever taken of it. What is holding it together has quietly changed. Just 2 days before the main weekend, on June 10th, 2 climbers in their 40s had been found dead below the Aiguille du Tricot on the Bionnassay Glacier. A fall. The season had already opened its account before most climbers had even packed their bags. And still, when the forecast showed a perfect window for June 12th, the climbers came. Of course they did. By the morning of Friday, June 12th, teams were on Gran Paradiso, on Mont Maudit, on the Brenva Spur, and on the Matterhorn. By the first days of that perfect June window, everything was aligned. The weather was open, the teams were ready. June 12th, 3 a.m., Val Savoie, Italy. Sergio Martinelli, Michael Zenati, and Antonio Sardano left the Refugio Federico Chabod in the dark, headlamps on, moving toward the north face of Gran Paradiso. Roped together, as you must be on terrain like that, their plan was to be back at the refuge by evening. 7:30 p.m. came. They did not return. Family members raised the alarm. Teams from the Soccorso Alpino Valdostano deployed into the fading light. A GPS locator, activated by one of the climbers, gave the rescue helicopters a position. At approximately 3,600 meters on the north face, they found all 3 of them. The fall had carried them roughly 400 meters down the face. Investigators believe one climber lost his footing and pulled the others, on bare ice, on a steep face, roped together. There is no second act to that sequence. Recovery operations continued through the night. 6 a.m. Saturday morning, Mont Maudit, 150 kilometers to the northwest. A brother and sister from Savoie, France, aged 24 and 26, were moving up the Kuffner Ridge, one of the most committing routes in the entire Mont Blanc Massif, a knife edge of rock and ice that has very little tolerance for error at any point along its length. A route that draws experienced climbers precisely because of how seriously it demands to be taken. A Slovak mountain guide, climbing nearby, heard the unmistakable sound of falling rocks and immediately contacted emergency services. The PGHM rescue unit in Chamonix, the busiest mountain rescue service in the world, responded within minutes. They found both siblings dead at the scene. The morning was barely underway, and it was already the worst day the Alps had seen in years. To understand why so many climbers fell on so many different mountains in a single weekend, you need to understand what a surface transition actually means at altitude. Think of neve as a safety margin built into the terrain itself, a layer of material that grips your crampons, absorbs a stumble, and, most importantly, gives you the fraction of a second you need to deploy your ice axe. Every serious alpine climber has trained that motion for years. A slip happens, and before conscious thought has even formed, the axe is already in the mountain. The fall is stopped. On bare ice, there is no fraction of a second. A crampon point that rolls on 50-degree hard glacier ice produces a fall that is already beyond the point of intervention before the climber knows it has begun. The ice axe skill is not useless. It simply never gets the chance to apply. You are not arresting a fall. You are already in one. Now add the permafrost factor. Permafrost, in plain terms, is the frozen water locked inside alpine rock faces that acts like an internal cement. When it thaws, holds that felt solid, yesterday may not be solid today. Crevasses open in places where the route description says they should not yet exist. The face that looks exactly like the guidebook photographs is not, in fact, the face described in the guidebook. That is what the Alps were presenting to climbers in June 2026. The appearance of a normal mid-June mountain, the reality of a midsummer one. Saturday morning, rescue teams are still on Gran Paradiso, 11 a.m. Mont Maudit. A second group of 3 climbers falls on the same mountain where the siblings died 5 hours earlier. All 3 survive, barely. Saturday afternoon, Italian side of Mont Blanc. A 44-year-old skier falls approximately 100 meters on the Brenva Spur while his partner watches. A rescue helicopter reaches the site. The skier is dead when it arrives. Hours later, the Matterhorn. Italian normal route. Near Pic Tindel, at 4,241 meters, a climber falls several hundred meters down the ridge. His rope partner is uninjured. He is not. By Saturday evening, the PGHM in Chamonix has responded to 11 separate incidents in the Mont Blanc Massif. 11. In one day, 7 people dead, across 4 mountains, in under 24 hours. Every single one of them fell. No storms, no avalanches, just the mountain, the ice, and the surface that was no longer what it appeared to be. Quick heads up, every week I drop a new update you won't find anywhere else. Please subscribe. Sunday, June 14th, Monte Pasubio, Italian pre-Alps. 2 more climbers fell approximately 100 meters in the Sojo Duderle area on the Vicenza side of the mountain. Fog had rolled in, complicating the rescue operation from the start. A third member of their group was found still roped to the face, alive. He was brought to safety. The weekend's total stood at 9. In the communities around Chamonix and the Aosta Valley, rescue coordinators spoke with rare openness about what they had just witnessed. The PGHM in Chamonix alone typically handles more than 2,000 rescue interventions across a full year. What June 13th had delivered in a single day left even experienced teams visibly shaken. In Trentino, 3 families were processing the loss of close friends who had simply gone to climb a mountain they knew and loved. People who had done everything right. When you lay the sequence of events across that weekend in order, a clear picture begins to form. The first contributing factor was the snowpack deficit. The winter of 2025 to 2026 delivered below-average snow across the Western Alps. By mid-June, that translated directly to bare glacier ice on routes that would normally carry firm névé. The guidebooks that described those routes were written for névé conditions. The training most of those climbers had done was likely on névé. The surface they actually encountered was categorically different, and there was nothing in the sky or the forecast to flag it. The second factor was accelerating permafrost degradation. Decades of warming in the Alps have been slowly dissolving the internal binding structure of these high faces. Rock bands that held reliably for generations have been quietly losing their cohesion every summer. The surface of the mountain looks unchanged. The structure beneath it is not. The third and most counterintuitive factor was the trap of perfect conditions. Every death that weekend happened under blue skies. Beautiful weather was not a safety signal. It was a crowd-gathering mechanism. It filled 4 major mountains with climbers on a weekend when the underfoot conditions were, in fact, more dangerous than any normal mid-June window. Rescue coordinators have a phrase for what happened across those 4 mountains simultaneously. A convergence of hazards, Each factor in isolation was something experienced climbers navigate routinely. All three together, across multiple faces in a single weekend, left almost no margin for error on any of them. 9 people entered that window. 9 people did not come back from it. The 9 deaths across the Alps in June 2026 did not happen because these climbers were reckless. They happened because a mountain range that was reliably predictable in mid-June is no longer reliably predictable in mid-June, and the information systems that climbers depend on, the guidebooks, the trip reports, the weather forecasts, have not kept pace with that change. Do you think alpine authorities are doing enough to communicate how dramatically conditions on these classic routes have shifted in recent seasons? Or does the responsibility for researching current underfoot conditions ultimately fall on the individual climber? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one.